Karen made $3,200 in 3 months selling access to my $40,000 pool. Let me repeat that. This woman turned my backyard into her personal water park business while I was at work, charging strangers $85 a head to swim in the pool I'm still making payments on. I'm pulling into my driveway after a 12-hour shift inspecting chemical plants, and there's a line of cars blocking my garage. 20-something people are partying in my backyard like it's spring break in Cancun. And there's Bethany Ashford, standing at my pool gate with a cash box and laminated business cards, collecting money like she's running a legitimate resort. The smell of expensive sunscreen mixed with spilled wine hit me before I even got out of my truck. Through my bedroom window that night, I could hear shrieking laughter until 2 in the morning. What would you do if someone turned your property into their personal ATM? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Trust me, this story gets wild. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Trevor McKenzie, I'm 52, and I work as a chemical safety inspector for Monroe County. Not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills and keeps people from accidentally poisoning themselves with industrial chemicals. 18 months ago, I went through the ugliest divorce you can imagine. My ex-wife took half of everything, including my dignity and most of my savings. The one thing I fought tooth and nail to keep was our house in Sunset Meadows, specifically because of the pool. See, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and swimming is pretty much the only exercise that doesn't make my blood sugar go completely haywire. The sound of my insulin pump beeping every few hours is just part of life now. I keep chlorine test strips in my shirt pocket out of habit. When you work with hazardous materials for a living, you develop a thing about checking chemical levels in everything. I share custody of my twin daughters, Emma and Sophie. They're 15, and they're the only good thing that came out of my marriage. Every other weekend, they'd come over and we'd spend hours in the pool. It was our thing. The one place where I felt like I was still a decent dad instead of just another divorced guy paying alimony. Now, about Bethany Ashford. She's 42, married to Marcus, who owns the local First National Bank branch. Marcus travels constantly for business, which leaves Bethany with way too much time on her hands and an unhealthy obsession with controlling the neighborhood. She gave herself the title HOA Compliance Officer, which isn't even a real position. But nobody on the board had the guts to stop her because she documents every tiny violation with these legal-sounding letters that make people think she actually knows what she's talking about. Picture a woman who always wears white capri pants and carries an iPad like it's some kind of government badge. Bethany's whole identity revolves around treating our neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She needs validation so desperately that she'll create problems just to solve them publicly. Our HOA, Sunset Meadows, has 120 homes built in 2018. My house sits on a corner lot with a premium privacy fence. The pool is only visible from second-story windows, which is exactly why I paid extra for the location. According to the HOA bylaws, and trust me, I read every word after the divorce, recreational facilities are private property unless specifically designated for community use. The first violation happened on a Sunday in March. I'd taken the girls to visit my ex-wife's parents for the weekend. When we got back around 6 p.m., my backyard looked like a hurricane had hit it. Sticky poolside tiles covered in sunscreen residue, soggy cigarette butts floating in the filter. My pool's chemical balance was so destroyed I had to shock it twice just to get the green tint out. But here's what really got me. My security camera showed Bethany directing a catering team like she was hosting her own personal resort. She had them set up a full bar station on my pool deck. A bar station, on my property, while I was gone. When I saw that footage, my blood sugar spiked so high I had to give myself an emergency insulin injection right there in my driveway. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the insulin pen. I knocked on Bethany's door that night. She answered wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of wine like nothing had happened. When I asked her about the pool party, she smiled that fake smile and said, "Oh, Trevor, honey, that was just a small gathering for property value assessment. Nothing to worry your little head about." Property value assessment. Right. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a reasonable person. But I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, Bethany showed up at my front door with 8 people she claimed were HOA board members and aesthetic consultants. I recognized maybe 3 actual board members. The rest looked like they belonged at a country club brunch, not a property inspection. "Trevor, sweetie," she said, adjusting her oversized sunglasses, "your pool area needs community oversight. Property values, you understand. We simply can't have substandard recreational facilities bringing down the neighborhood appeal. Before I could process what was happening, she'd walked past me into my backyard like she owned the place. Her consultants, who I later figured out were just her book club friends, spread out around the pool with clipboards and phones, taking pictures of everything. One woman actually brought a professional photographer. A photographer. They were treating my pool like a real estate listing while I stood there in my work clothes trying not to be late for a chemical plant inspection in Bradenton. "Ma'am, this is private property," I said, pulling out my phone to document everything. "You can't just walk onto my land with a photography crew." Bethany laughed like I'd told a hilarious joke. "Oh, Trevor, community property assessment is clearly outlined in the HOA guidelines. I'm surprised you haven't read them more carefully." The thing is, I had read them. Every single page. Twice. There was nothing in there about uninvited pool inspections by fake consultants. But I couldn't stay to argue. I had a job that actually mattered, keeping factory workers from getting poisoned by chemical leaks. So I left 8 strangers lounging around my pool while I went to work. When I got home that evening, they were still there. Still taking pictures. Still acting like they owned my backyard. The smell of Bethany's vanilla perfume was so thick around my pool equipment, it lingered for days afterwards. That's when I decided to take control. Working in chemical safety teaches you that the best defense is clear documentation and proper warning systems. So I spent my evening installing private property, no trespassing signs in English, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. My daughters helped me add emoji symbols because they said pictures work better than words with entitled people. I also changed my Wi-Fi password from Pooltime 2023 to something unprintable. Let Bethany's friends try to post their Instagram stories without internet access. Tuesday morning, I thought my sign strategy had worked. No mysterious cars in my driveway, no book club members pretending to inspect my chlorine levels. I should have known it was too easy. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call at work from my neighbor Carl, a retired police officer who lives 2 houses down. "Trevor," he said, "you might want to check your HOA email when you get a chance. That Ashford woman has filed some kind of formal complaint." The complaint was 3 pages long, 3 pages, about my property signs being aesthetically inappropriate and potentially discriminatory against community members seeking legitimate access to recreational facilities. She claimed my multilingual signs created a hostile environment and suggested I might be psychologically unstable due to my recent divorce. She even included photos of my signs with red circles around the emoji symbols, claiming they were cryptic symbols that could be interpreted as threats. And the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting for Friday night to discuss my hostile signage and anti-community behavior. I had to laugh. This woman turned my pool into her personal business, and somehow I'm the one with anti-community behavior? But here's what really got me. At the bottom of the complaint in tiny print was a note that future aesthetic inspections would be conducted with or without homeowner presence to ensure objective evaluation. Translation: Bethany was planning to keep using my pool whether I liked it or not. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my insulin testing kit, trying to figure out my next move. My blood sugar was all over the place from stress. The girls were coming over that weekend, and I didn't want them to see their dad getting pushed around by some entitled HOA wannabe. I looked out at my pool, the one thing I'd fought to keep after my marriage fell apart, and made a decision. If Bethany wanted to play games with official-sounding paperwork, I'd show her what real documentation looked like. After all, I spend my days writing reports that could shut down entire chemical plants if they're not perfect. How hard could it be to out-bureaucrat a suburban Karen? Friday's HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, which smells like stale coffee and carpet cleaner from 2018. Bethany had prepared a PowerPoint presentation about property signage standards and community cohesion. She wore a navy blue blazer like she was running for city council. The other board members looked uncomfortable as she clicked through slides of my signs, zoomed in to make the emoji symbols look as menacing as possible. When she got to the slide titled Psychological Indicators of Antisocial Behavior, I realized she was trying to paint me as some kind of unhinged hermit. "Mr. Mackenzie's hostile signage creates liability issues for the community," she explained to the 5 people who bothered to show up. "What if a child can't read the warnings and gets injured? What if elderly residents feel threatened by these cryptic symbols?" I waited for her to finish, then stood up with my own folder. Working in regulatory compliance teaches you that facts beat hysteria every single time. These are standard OSHA-approved warning signs, I said, pulling out examples from chemical plants I'd inspected. The symbols aren't cryptic. They're internationally recognized safety pictograms. And the multiple languages? That's called being considerate to our diverse neighborhood. The board voted to table the sign issue pending further review, which was basically their way of saying Bethany's complaint was ridiculous without actually saying it. But Bethany wasn't done, not even close. The next Monday, I came home from work to find commercial-grade patio furniture set up around my pool. Massive umbrellas, cushioned chaise lounges, and a mini-fridge plugged into my outdoor outlet. Bethany was there with 6 friends, all wearing swimsuits that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. They were drinking frozen margaritas and acting like they were at a resort in the Bahamas. "What the hell is this?" I asked, standing at my own pool gate like a visitor. "Oh, Trevor," Bethany called out, waving her margarita glass. "The furniture ensures proper sight lines for thorough property evaluation. We need to assess the pool area from multiple angles for our comprehensive report." One of her friends, a blonde woman I didn't recognize, handed me a $20 bill. "This should cover the inspection participation fee," she said with a straight face. That's when I realized Bethany was charging people to use my pool. She was running a business out of my backyard and calling it an HOA inspection. My daughters were supposed to come over that weekend. How was I supposed to explain to Emma and Sophie that they couldn't use their own pool because Daddy's neighbor had turned it into a day spa? That night, I dragged every piece of furniture into my garage. The sound of metal chair legs scraping across concrete echoed through the neighborhood at midnight, but I didn't care. If Bethany wanted to play property games, she'd learn that 2 could play. The next morning, she was back with bolt cutters. Actual bolt cutters, like a burglar. I watched from my kitchen window as this woman in designer white capri pants cut through the chains I'd used to secure my pool gate. She'd brought her nail technician, apparently doubling as a water quality specialist, who proceeded to test my pool chemistry by dipping her painted fingernails into the water. That's when I knew documentation wasn't enough. I needed professional-grade security. I called my buddy Jake, who runs security for the chemical plants I inspect. He hooked me up with a camera system that could read license plates from 50 yards away and automatically upload footage to cloud storage. The kind of setup that costs 15 grand when corporations buy it, but only 800 bucks when you know a guy who knows a guy. "Trevor," Jake said while we installed the cameras, "this system records everything in 4K. If someone so much as looks at your pool funny, you'll have evidence that would hold up in federal court." The cameras were tiny, disguised as garden lights and birdhouses. Bethany would never spot them unless she knew exactly what to look for. But the real genius was the smartphone app. Every time someone entered my backyard, I'd get an instant alert with live video footage. I could watch Bethany's trespassing adventures in real time from my office 30 miles away. The system paid for itself the first week. I documented 17 separate intrusions, including Bethany bringing a landscape designer to evaluate pool placement optimization, and a woman who claimed to be testing feng shui energy flows. Each intrusion got filed in my growing evidence folder, complete with timestamps and photographic documentation. Bethany had no idea she was being recorded in professional quality video every time she violated my property rights. And I was starting to enjoy watching her dig her own legal grave, one pool party at a time. 3 weeks into my surveillance operation, Bethany crossed a line that made everything before look like child's play. She created a Facebook page called Sunset Meadows Pool Experience and started advertising my pool like it was a commercial business. I found the page by accident while researching HOA violation procedures. The header photo was my pool, taken from my backyard, with a logo that said, "Exclusive Community Pool Access." The About section claimed they offered premium aquatic experiences in a luxurious residential setting. 43 people had RSVP'd for that weekend's pool experience. The price, $75 per person, $75, to use my pool. That I pay to maintain. In my backyard. I screenshotted everything before Bethany could take it down, then did some quick math. If she was charging $75 per person for 43 people, she was planning to make over $3,000 in one afternoon, using my property. The posts in the event page made my blood pressure spike so high I had to take my emergency medication. People were asking about parking availability, bathroom access, and whether they could bring outside alcohol. One woman asked if the estate provided towel service. Estate. She was calling my middle-class house an estate. Saturday morning, I positioned myself at my kitchen window with a fresh cup of coffee and my smartphone connected to the security cameras. I wanted to watch this disaster unfold in real time. Cars started arriving at 10 a.m. Not just a couple cars, an entire parade of vehicles that had to park 3 blocks away because my street couldn't handle the traffic. People were walking down the sidewalk carrying pool bags and coolers like they were heading to a public beach. The first group of 20 people gathered at my pool gate, where Bethany stood with a clipboard and a cash box. She was wearing a white sundress and a visor that said Event Coordinator. She actually had business cards. My security cameras picked up everything in crystal clear detail. I watched Bethany collect cash payments while explaining pool rules to complete strangers. She pointed out my outdoor bathroom window and told people to knock if they needed facilities. My bathroom, in my house. By noon, there were 42 people in my backyard. My pool pump was working overtime, making a grinding noise I'd never heard before. The water level dropped 6 inches from all the splashing and displacement. That's when the disaster struck. A woman in her 60s, probably someone's grandmother, slipped on the wet concrete around my pool deck and hit her head on the coping. Blood in the water, people screaming, someone calling 911. I ran outside as the ambulance pulled up. The paramedics had to drain part of my pool to treat the woman's head wound properly. She ended up needing 12 stitches and a concussion evaluation at the emergency room. "Are you the homeowner?" the lead paramedic asked me. "Yes, and I had no idea any of this was happening," I said, which was technically true. "Sir, you need to contact your insurance immediately. Large gatherings like this require special liability coverage." That's when it hit me. If that woman sued, my homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover it because I'd never authorized a commercial event. Bethany's pool party could have cost me my house. After everyone left, I assessed the damage. My pool pump had burned out from overuse, an $800 repair. The concrete had chips and scratches from people dragging chairs around. Someone had broken my pool light fixture. The chemical balance was so destroyed I had to drain and refill the entire thing. But the worst part, my ex-wife called that evening. She'd heard about the incident from her sister who lived across town. Word was spreading that I was running some kind of unsafe pool business out of my house. "Trevor," she said, using that disappointed voice I remembered too well, "Emma and Sophie are saying their friends are making fun of them at school. Something about their dad's pool party disaster? What's going on over there?" I tried to explain, but how do you tell your ex-wife that your HOA board member is sabotaging your life? It sounds insane even when it's true. That night, I sat in my garage looking at the evidence I'd collected. 3 months of documentation, hundreds of photos and videos, financial records showing Bethany's illegal profits, bank statements proving the damage costs. But I knew documentation wouldn't stop her. Bethany was making too much money and having too much fun playing resort owner with my property. That's when I remembered something from my chemical safety training. The best way to stop a dangerous process isn't to ask nicely or file a complaint. Sometimes you have to make the process itself impossible to continue. And I knew exactly how to do it. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source, my ex-wife, Linda. She called me Tuesday evening while I was testing my blood sugar before dinner. We usually only talked about custody schedules, so I figured something was wrong with the girls. "Trevor, I need to ask you something," she said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "I'm looking at a permit application here at the planning office, and I recognize your address. Has someone been filing pool modification permits for your property?" Linda works in the city planning department. Something I'd completely forgotten during all the drama with Bethany. If anyone would know about legitimate pool inspections or modifications, it would be her. "What kind of permits?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "That's just it. There aren't any. I searched back 2 years. No permits for inspections, no applications for commercial use, no modifications requests, nothing." Which is weird because I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that someone's been doing major pool work over there. My heart started racing. Not from diabetes this time, from pure realization. "Linda, if someone wanted to run a business out of a residential pool, what would they need?" Papers rustled again. Commercial pool permits, business license, liability insurance, health department inspections, probably zoning variances. "Trevor, why are you asking?" I spent the next hour explaining everything to Linda. By the end, she was furious on my behalf, which was strange since we could barely have a civil conversation during the divorce. Trevor, what that woman is doing is completely illegal. Like, shut down by 5 different agencies illegal. If you want, I can pull the exact regulations tomorrow. Wednesday morning, Linda called back with a document that changed everything. I've got the city codes pulled up, she said. For any pool-related commercial activity, you need a minimum of 6 different permits and inspections. Health Department water quality certification, business operation license, commercial liability insurance, zoning compliance for increased traffic, parking impact study, and noise ordinance exemption. She paused, and I could hear her typing. Trevor, each violation carries a fine between $500 and $5,000. If someone's been running an unlicensed commercial operation, we're talking about potentially $30,000 in penalties, plus immediate shutdown orders from multiple agencies. But here's what really blew my mind. Linda found the original HOA bylaws from 2018, not the modified version Bethany had been quoting. The original documents specifically prohibit any commercial activity on residential lots, Linda explained. It's in Section 12, subsection 4. Quote, no lot shall be used for commercial purposes, including but not limited to paid recreational access, event hosting, or business operations. End quote. Bethany had zero authority for pool inspections, zero authority for aesthetic evaluations, zero authority for anything she'd been doing. Everything she'd claimed about HOA regulations was completely made up. Linda, how is this possible? How did she get away with this for so long? Because most people don't actually read the bylaws, Trevor. They just assume HOA board members know what they're talking about. It's like when people don't read contracts before signing. They trust that someone else did the homework. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with all the documents spread out. City codes, HOA bylaws, permit requirements, my 3 months of video evidence. For the first time since this nightmare started, I realized I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one with all the power. Bethany had been running an illegal commercial operation on my property. She'd committed insurance fraud, tax evasion, and probably a dozen other violations I hadn't even thought of yet. But I also realized something else. If I wanted to stop her permanently, I needed more than paperwork. I needed to make her pool parties physically impossible to continue. And thanks to my background in chemical safety, I knew exactly how to do that. That night, I opened my laptop and started researching something I'd learned about during my certification training. Temporary watermarking systems used in industrial settings. When chemical plants need to track water contamination or test flow patterns, they use food-safe dyes that show up immediately but don't cause permanent damage. The perfect system already existed. I just needed to adapt it for my specific situation. I called my former colleague Maria, who runs quality control for a medical supply company in Tampa. She'd know about safe chemical markers better than anyone. Trevor, you're talking about methylene blue derivatives, she said after I explained what I needed. We use them for medical procedures all the time. Completely safe for human contact, but visible for weeks. The stuff we use for kidney function tests stains skin bright purple for about 14 days. Maria, hypothetically speaking, how would someone deploy that kind of marker in a pool setting? She laughed. Hypothetically, you'd need about 2 ounces of concentrated dye for a standard residential pool. Mix it with a polymer adhesive, the kind they use for temporary tattoos, and it'll stick to skin and hair until it naturally sheds off. Totally harmless, just embarrassing. And how would someone trigger the release remotely? Pool chemical injection systems are perfect for that. Most people already have them for chlorine. You'd just swap out the chlorine reservoir with your dye mixture and trigger it with a smartphone app. The pool's circulation system does all the work for you. Perfect. I already had an automatic chemical injection system installed when I bought the house. The next day I drove to a medical supply warehouse in Sarasota where Maria had connections. The dye cost me $150 for enough to mark every person in my pool for 2 weeks. The polymer adhesive was another $60. While I was there, I picked up motion sensors designed for pharmacy security systems. These weren't your basic home security sensors. They could distinguish between wind-blown debris and actual human movement, and they connected directly to smartphone apps. Back home, I spent the weekend converting my pool's chemical system. The beauty of the setup was its simplicity. When the motion sensors detected unauthorized entry, they'd send a signal to my phone. I could then trigger the dye release with a single tap. The whole system cost under $300 and used equipment I could buy legally at any pool supply store. But I needed more than just a dye trap. I needed witnesses and legal backup. I called the best attorney I could afford, Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in property rights and insurance fraud. Her consultation fee was $200, but I figured it was worth it to make sure I wasn't accidentally breaking any laws myself. "Mr. Mackenzie," she said after reviewing my evidence, "what you're describing is clear-cut criminal trespassing and commercial fraud. The woman's been running an unlicensed business on your property while exposing you to massive liability. She explained that I had every legal right to modify my pool chemistry as long as the chemicals weren't dangerous. Food-safe marking dye fell well within legal bounds for property protection. Think of it like a more sophisticated version of those exploding dye packs banks use," Rebecca said. "You're marking trespassers for identification purposes. Completely legal." She also helped me file official complaints with the city business licensing department and the health department. Once those were on record, Bethany's operation would be flagged in the system as illegal. Next, I needed allies in the neighborhood. I'd been so focused on fighting Bethany alone that I hadn't considered other people might be having similar problems. I started with Carl, my neighbor who'd witnessed some of Bethany's late-night furniture removal attempts. Turns out, Carl had been documenting her activities too, just in case. "Trevor," he said over coffee in his kitchen, "that woman's been using your pool situation to establish precedent. Last month she tried to claim authority over my fence height, said it was an HOA compliance issue." Carl agreed to be my witness for the final confrontation. As a retired police officer, his testimony would carry serious weight if things got legal. I also reached out to my daughters, who'd been embarrassed by the whole situation. Emma suggested I set up a group text with neighbors who'd complained about Bethany's overreach. "Dad, you're not the only one she's been bothering," Sophie said. "Mrs. Patterson, 3 streets over, said Bethany tried to fine her for having the wrong color mailbox." Within 2 days, I had a network of 8 neighbors who'd experienced Bethany's fake authority trips. They all agreed to support each other if she retaliated against anyone for challenging her. The final piece was timing. According to Bethany's Facebook page, she had another grand pool experience scheduled for the following Saturday. 56 people had RSVP'd. She was charging $85 per person this time, almost $5,000, in one afternoon, using my property. That's when I made my decision. Saturday would be the day Bethany learned what happens when you mess with someone who handles hazardous materials for a living. By Thursday, Bethany must have sensed something was wrong. Maybe it was my sudden calm demeanor when I saw her around the neighborhood. Maybe it was the fact that I'd stopped filing complaints or arguing with her. Whatever it was, she decided to take preemptive action. At 2:30 in the morning, Carl called me. "Trevor, wake up. Look out your front window." I stumbled out of bed, trying not to trip over my insulin testing kit on the nightstand. Through the blinds, I could see a figure in white clothing crouched by my security cameras, holding what looked like a spray paint can. Bethany was vandalizing my surveillance system. I watched her move methodically from camera to camera, spraying black paint over the lenses. She had a flashlight duct taped to her wrist and moved with the focused efficiency of someone who'd planned this operation carefully. The irony was beautiful. She was spray painting my cameras while being recorded by the backup cameras she didn't know existed. "Carl, are you getting this?" I whispered into the phone. "Every second, buddy. My security system has a clear view of your driveway. This is going to look great in court." After Bethany finished her vandalism spree and crept back to her house, I stayed awake reviewing the footage. My hidden cameras, the ones disguised as garden lights, had captured everything in perfect 4K resolution. Bethany's face was clearly visible. The timestamps were precise. The evidence was undeniable. Friday morning, I filed a vandalism report with the sheriff's office. Deputy Martinez came out to take photos and review the video footage. "Mr. Mackenzie, this is pretty clear-cut property destruction," she said, photographing the painted camera lenses. "We'll add it to the existing file." Existing file? Turns out other neighbors had been reporting Bethany's activities for months. She was already under investigation for harassment and making false claims about HOA authority. But Bethany wasn't done with her escalation campaign. That afternoon, she showed up at my front door with a man wearing a uniform from Advanced Security Solutions. He was carrying bolt cutters and had a locksmith's toolkit. "Trevor, this is David from our contracted security company," Bethany announced, like she was introducing a legitimate business partner. "We're updating pool access protocols for safety compliance." David looked uncomfortable as he explained that Bethany had hired him to change my pool gate locks and install new access controls. "Ma'am," I said to Bethany, "you can't hire someone to change locks on my property. That's called breaking and entering." "Actually," she replied, pulling out a folder of official-looking papers, The HOA emergency access provision clearly states that compliance officers can secure unsafe recreational facilities pending full inspection. I looked at David, who was studying the ground like he wanted to disappear. David, before you cut anything, you might want to know that this woman has no legal authority here. She's not a real HOA officer, and these inspections aren't authorized by anyone. I showed him my phone with the city planning department's email confirming 0 permits or inspections on file. David packed up his tools and left without saying another word to Bethany. Apparently, even hired contractors have limits when it comes to obviously illegal activities. But the locksmith incident told me something important. Bethany was getting desperate. Her pool business was making too much money for her to give up easily, which meant she was going to try something even more extreme before Saturday's big event. I was right. Saturday morning at 6 a.m., she made her final play. A van pulled up to my house with Monroe County Health Inspector painted on the side. 2 men in official-looking uniforms got out and headed straight for my pool area. I met them at the gate with my coffee and my phone camera running. "Gentlemen, can I see some identification?" The fake inspector handed me a laminated badge that looked like it came from an office supply store. The photo was clearly a selfie, and the signature was obviously forged. "Sir, we're here to conduct emergency water quality testing based on complaints about commercial pool operations." "Really? What's the complaint number?" Silence. "Who filed the complaint?" More silence. "What department do you work for specifically?" The fake inspector looked at his partner, who was already walking back to the van. "This is ridiculous," the first guy said. "Lady, you didn't tell us this guy was going to ask for actual documentation." They drove off without another word, leaving Bethany standing in my driveway in her white capri pants and oversized sunglasses, looking like a villain from a bad cable TV movie. "Bethany," I said, "bringing fake government officials to my property is a federal crime. You might want to think about that before tonight's pool party." She turned and walked away without responding, but I could see her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. The countdown to Saturday evening had officially begun. Saturday afternoon arrived with the kind of perfect Florida weather that makes pool parties irresistible. Sunny skies, 85 degrees, barely a breeze. If I were running a legitimate pool business, it would have been a perfect day for customers. Instead, it was perfect for watching Bethany's entire operation collapse in spectacular fashion. By 3 p.m., cars were already arriving for her grand pool experience. Not just a few cars this time, an entire convoy of vehicles parking 3 streets away because my neighborhood couldn't handle the traffic volume. People were walking down sidewalks carrying pool bags, coolers, and inflatable toys like they were heading to a public water park. I positioned myself at my kitchen window with a fresh cup of coffee and my smartphone connected to the hidden camera system. Carl was at his house across the street with his phone ready to call 911 if things got out of hand. The first group of 20 people gathered at my pool gate where Bethany had set up what looked like a professional event check-in station. She had a pop-up tent, a folding table with a cash box, and printed wristbands for pool access. She was wearing a white sundress with event coordinator embroidered on the chest. I watched through my cameras as she collected cash payments while explaining pool rules to complete strangers. $85 per person, cash only. She actually had a credit card reader attached to her phone for people who didn't bring enough bills. "Welcome to the Sunset Meadows pool experience," she announced to the growing crowd. "Please review the safety guidelines on your wristband and remember to stay hydrated. The estate provides complimentary water bottles." The estate. She was still calling my house an estate. By 4 p.m., there were 53 people in my backyard, the actual count according to my security system's facial recognition feature. My pool was so crowded it looked like a public swimming facility during spring break. But here's what made this gathering different from all the previous ones. Bethany had hired a local influencer to live stream the entire event. A 20-something woman with professional photography equipment was broadcasting to her 15,000 followers, promoting the exclusive luxury pool experience and encouraging people to book future events. Perfect. I couldn't have asked for better documentation or a larger audience for what was about to happen. At 4:15, I received the motion sensor alert on my phone, large groups moving in unauthorized areas. The system was asking if I wanted to activate defensive measures. I watched the live feed for another minute. Bethany was standing at the pool's edge in her white sundress, raising a champagne glass to toast her successful business venture. 53 people were cheering and taking photos with their phones. The influencer was explaining to her live stream audience how they could book their own private estate pool parties through Bethany's event planning service. "This is absolutely the most exclusive pool experience in Monroe County," she gushed into her camera. "The hostess really knows how to create luxury experiences." I tapped the activation button on my phone. The dye released through the pool's circulation system in exactly 30 seconds. I'd timed it during my test runs to achieve maximum visual impact. At first, nothing happened. The circulation jets continued running normally, and everyone kept swimming and splashing like nothing had changed. Then the purple started. It began as small swirls near the circulation jets, like someone had dropped food coloring into the water. Within 60 seconds, the entire pool had turned a brilliant purple color that looked like grape Kool-Aid mixed with motor oil. People started noticing their skin turning purple where the water touched. First, just their hands and arms, then anywhere the dyed water had contacted. The panic was immediate and complete. "What's happening?" someone screamed. "Is this safe?" another person shouted. "I can't wash this off," a woman yelled, frantically rubbing her purple arms with a towel. The influencer, still live streaming, was now documenting a complete disaster instead of a luxury experience. Her 15,000 viewers were watching real-time chaos as 53 people discovered they'd been marked with semi-permanent purple dye. Bethany stood frozen at the pool's edge, her white sundress now splattered with purple water. Her face had gone completely pale except for the purple handprints where she'd tried to help people out of the pool. "Everyone stay calm," she shouted, but her voice was cracking with panic. "This is just a minor technical issue." The influencer turned her camera toward Bethany. "Ma'am, what exactly is in this water? My followers are asking if this is some kind of chemical accident." That's when Bethany realized her exclusive luxury experience was being broadcast live to thousands of people as a complete disaster. And I realized it was time to make my entrance. I walked out of my house at exactly 4:30, carrying a folder of documents and wearing my most professional button-down shirt. 53 purple-stained people were standing around my pool area in various stages of panic, and Bethany was frantically trying to explain to the live-streaming influencer why everyone looked like they'd been attacked by a giant grape. The smell hit me first. Grape-scented dye mixed with chlorine and about 50 different types of expensive sunscreen. It was like walking into a candy factory that had exploded inside a swimming pool. Carl appeared at my side, having crossed the street to serve as my official witness. He was wearing his retired police officer jacket and carrying his phone to record everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'm Trevor McKenzie, and this is my private property." The influencer immediately turned her camera toward me. 15,000 people were now watching live as I confronted Bethany in front of her purple-stained customers. "Sir," the influencer said, "can you explain what just happened to all these people?" "Certainly. What happened is that 53 people just participated in an unauthorized commercial operation on private property. The purple dye is a harmless marking system I installed to identify trespassers." Bethany stepped forward, purple water dripping from her white sundress. "Trevor, you can't do this. This is assault. I'm calling my lawyer." "Actually, Bethany, it's not assault. It's property protection using food-safe marking dye, the same stuff they use for medical procedures." I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. This is a certification from Monroe County Health Department confirming the dye is completely harmless. The crowd was listening now. Purple people were pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. "More importantly," I continued, "I have 3 months of documentation proving that you've been running an illegal commercial business on my property." I held up my smartphone showing the security footage. "I have video evidence of you charging people to use my pool, bank records showing thousands of dollars in transactions, and documentation proving you have 0 permits for any commercial operation." That's when Deputy Martinez arrived, responding to Carl's earlier call about a large gathering and possible business license violations. She took one look at the purple-stained crowd and immediately called for backup. "Ma'am," she said to Bethany, "can you show me your permits for this commercial operation?" Bethany's face went even whiter than the purple made possible. "This isn't commercial. This is a community gathering for property assessment." "Community gathering?" Deputy Martinez looked around at the cash box, the event check-in table, and the professional live streaming equipment. "With admission fees and business equipment?" I handed the deputy my folder of evidence. "Officer, I've documented every unauthorized entry onto my property for the past 3 months. Ms. Ashford has been operating an unlicensed pool business, filing false HOA claims, and today she brought 53 people onto my property for a paid event." The influencer was still live streaming, providing real-time commentary to her audience. "This is incredible," she said into her camera. "We've just discovered that this pool party was apparently totally illegal, and the homeowner just marked everyone with purple dye to prove it." Deputy Martinez reviewed my documentation while more police cars arrived. The sight of multiple squad cars drew neighbors out of their houses to see what was happening. "Mr. McKenzie," the deputy said, "this documentation is very thorough. Ms. Ashford, I need to see identification and any business permits you have for operating on this property." "I don't need permits," Bethany shouted, but her voice was getting desperate. "I'm the HOA compliance officer. I have authority to inspect community properties." "Ma'am, according to the city records, there is no such position as HOA compliance officer for this community, and even if there were, charging admission for pool parties wouldn't fall under inspection authority." That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. "Bethany," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, including the 15,000 live stream viewers, "you've been running an illegal business on my property for 3 months. You've committed trespassing, fraud, and business license violations. You've exposed me to massive insurance liability and cost me thousands in property damage." I paused, looking directly at her purple-stained face. "Oh, and one more thing. That purple dye, it lasts about 2 weeks. You might want to reschedule your bank board meeting." The crowd went completely silent. Even the influencer stopped talking to her live stream audience. Deputy Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing and operating a business without proper permits." As Bethany was being read her rights, purple handprints covering the police car as she gestured frantically, I looked around at the crowd of purple-stained people and realized something important. Justice doesn't always come from filing complaints or following proper channels. Sometimes it comes from being smarter than the people trying to take advantage of you. The aftermath of Purple Pool Gate, as the local news started calling it, was swift and satisfying in ways I never could have imagined. Bethany was charged with criminal trespassing, operating a business without proper permits, and attempting to bribe a government official. The fake health inspector incident added charges for impersonating government employees. Her total bail came to $15,000, which Marcus had to pay using funds from their joint savings account. The influencer's live stream had been saved and shared across multiple social media platforms. Within 48 hours, #PoolKaren was trending nationwide with over 2 million views. The video of purple-stained Bethany being arrested while trying to explain her property assessment authority became an instant classic of entitled behavior getting its comeuppance. But the real victory came in civil court. My attorney, Rebecca Martinez, filed a comprehensive lawsuit for property damage, emotional distress, medical expenses related to my diabetes stress episodes, and lost enjoyment of my property. The evidence was overwhelming. Video documentation, financial records of Bethany's illegal profits, witness testimony from neighbors, and the dramatic purple dye incident as proof of ongoing trespassing. Bethany's insurance company refused to cover her because operating an unlicensed business voided her liability protection. She had to pay the settlement from personal assets, $8,500 for pool repairs, legal fees, medical costs, and punitive damages. The court also issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting Bethany from coming within 50 feet of my property. Any violation would result in immediate arrest and additional charges. Within 6 months, Marcus transferred to a First National branch in North Carolina. Neighbors told me he'd discovered the full extent of Bethany's illegal business activities when credit card companies started calling about unpaid merchant services for her event planning operation. Apparently, she'd been hiding the pool party income and spending it on designer clothes and spa treatments. The HOA held emergency elections and installed a completely new board with actual oversight procedures. The new bylaws specifically prohibit any member from claiming authority they don't legally possess and require board approval for any property inspections. But the best outcome was what happened to my relationship with the community. The purple dye incident had revealed that 8 other neighbors were dealing with Bethany's fake authority harassment. We formed an informal neighborhood watch group that meets monthly to discuss property rights and HOA governance. Carl leads most of the meetings since he has law enforcement experience. We also created a community pool fund, a legitimate one this time. Families contribute voluntarily to maintain a shared pool access program during designated hours. The money goes toward chemical testing, equipment maintenance, and liability insurance. Everything Bethany should have done if she'd actually wanted to create community pool access. Every Sunday afternoon, I host Safe Swim Sundays for neighborhood kids. I teach basic water safety and pool maintenance, turning my chemical safety knowledge into something that actually helps people. Emma and Sophie love helping with the classes, and it's become a highlight of our custody weekends. I also started offering monthly workshops on property rights and HOA authority. Too many people don't realize what power HOA boards actually have versus what they claim to have. My sessions teach neighbors how to research bylaws, verify board member authority, and document violations properly. The workshops have attracted people from other neighborhoods dealing with similar HOA overreach problems. Word spreads quickly when someone successfully fights back against petty authority figures. My diabetes management has improved dramatically since the stress of Bethany's harassment ended. My blood sugar levels are more stable, I'm sleeping better, and I actually look forward to using my pool again instead of dreading the next confrontation. 6 months after Purple Poolgate, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker who wants to feature the story in a project about property rights and social media justice. The working title is Swimming in Purple: When Karens Meet Chemistry. I haven't decided whether to participate, but it's nice to know that standing up to bullies can inspire other people to protect themselves. As for Bethany, I heard through neighborhood gossip that she's trying to start a new life in North Carolina. Hopefully, she's learned that you can't build a business by stealing other people's property and calling it community service. What would you do if someone turned your backyard into their personal business? Drop a comment and share your own HOA nightmare stories. I read every single one. And if this story inspired you to stand up to the petty tyrants in your own life, hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'm telling you about the time my other neighbor tried to steal my parking spot and ended up getting her car repossessed. Trust me, you won't want to miss that one.